From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the program. More time, please. Theresa May pushes Germany and France to back her request for a Brexit extension. Power play. Just how much influence should British MEPs have if they run in European elections? Trade threat. Why America may slap sanctions on everything from European helicopters to cheese and paintbrushes. Moscow welcome. Turkey's president gets cozy with Vladimir Putin despite U.S. warnings. And making an entrance, here's hoping Mrs. May's arrival in Germany goes better than the last time. Good to have you with us. It is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have Mairead McGuinness. She is an Irish MEP and first Vice President of the Parliament and sits with the European People's Party. Mairead, which of these stories are you watching closely?
Oh, gosh, I think I'm watching all of them. But, of course, the big one is the Council meeting tomorrow. What is going to happen on Brexit? It has implications for us here in the Parliament. And I was just, as I walked along here, talking to some British colleagues, and they don't know what's going to happen. We don't really know what's going to happen. But we've got lots of scenarios as to what might happen.
Absolutely. All right, we will talk about those scenarios a little later on, but also joining us tonight, Joe Leinen. He's a German MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group. What about you, Joe?
Now we have the EU-China summit here in town.
Right.
So China is just laughing about Europe, that we are using so much energy.
That's an interesting point you have to make later.
Whether we stay together or not, okay, I'm nervous and frustrated like everybody.
Okay, we're watching that closely. All right, also joining us, Valentina Pop. She's a journalist with the Wall Street Journal. And you, Valentina.
Hi. Well, my favorite story is the meeting of the autocrats, Putin and Erdogan. I mean, despite U.S. warnings, Erdogan just wants to show the world that he does whatever he pleases.
Well, there you go. We'll talk about that. All right, but first, let us begin with what else? Brexit. Because after failing to find a Brexit compromise in Britain, Theresa May has now gone looking for one in Europe. The UK Prime Minister started the day in Berlin with a visit to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and tonight she is in Paris to sit down with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Well, Mrs. May is trying to build support for a Brexit delay ahead of tomorrow's crucial EU summit. The UK's pitch is that it needs until the end of June to pack its bags properly. All right, let us join our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Paris. Darren, so what can we expect from Theresa May's last-minute meetings today?
Well, I think in part the reason that Theresa May has gone on this whirlwind tour of the European capitals today, meeting Mrs. Merkel, as you said, and Emmanuel Macron, is simply in part, Tessa, because I think there was an understanding on the British side that they didn't lay enough of the groundwork ahead of the last EU summit, that leaders were not prepared for Theresa May's demands, and she does not want to find herself in that position again. Of course, she is asking for an extension to the Brexit process, an extension up until June 30th. I think we're much more likely, though, in a situation where we will see a longer extension offered, potentially towards the end of the year, with the possibility that Britain could bring it to an end if it manages to find political consensus in Westminster and pass the deal. Now, you may ask yourself, why? Why is the European Union offering another extension to Brexit, given the fact that it is incredibly frustrated with this process, that it wants it to go away in many regards. It does not want many more of these EU Council summits eaten up with Brexit time? Well, simply, Tess, it's because actually the EU, despite what it says, isn't really properly ready for a no-deal Brexit. It is not ready for the UK to crash out, most certainly not Ireland, which would be heavily inflicted by a no-deal Brexit. And also, I don't think the continent is prepared for a economic eruption ahead of European elections in a couple of weeks' time. Now, we've heard from a whole series of foreign ministers today. They'll be meeting in Luxembourg. The French Europe minister actually suggested the French position hasn't changed, that they consider this demand for an extension neither agreed nor automatic. They, of course, have been quite vocal about the frustration of this process. The Irish, though, slightly more willing, understandably, to offer Britain an extension. Let's listen to what Simon Coveney, the Irish Foreign Minister, had to say a little bit earlier today.
You know, I think that EU leaders this week are open to an extension, but they certainly want to see a plan to go with that extension.
We want to understand what the UK needs this extension for, and what is the political surroundings around Theresa May to have this extension. And then comes the question of the conditions of what role want the UK to play during this extension time.
About the different scenarios earlier, and Mairead here was saying we probably are no closer to knowing which one would actually win. What do you think, though? Is there one option that is sort of leading the pack, all the other alternatives?
Yeah, it seems to be coming out of that meeting this morning is that an extension probably to the end of the year is on the table. There are still some in support of a shorter extension. I think what the European Union, Tessa, doesn't want is that every 3 months or so they have another council meeting to kick the can slightly further down the road. But be in no doubt, if there is to be a longer form of extension, it will have to come with conditions. Essentially, what they do not want is for Britain, potentially not under the leadership of Theresa May, to be a much more disruptive force within the European Union, to block budgets, for example, to veto legislation. And one of the things they'll have to work out tomorrow evening in Brussels is, can they attach conditions? It is a bit legally tricky, considering Britain will remain a full member. But what they will want, and I'm sure what Emmanuel Macron will try and get from Theresa May tonight, are assurances that Britain, if it gets an extension, will remain a good, fulsome member of the European Union that cooperates rather than tries to disrupt or obstruct the European Union in the months to come.
Right, thanks for that, Darren McAfee there in Paris. I'll start with you, Mairead. The terms you used before we went on air, it was Brexit brain freeze. I mean, there's a lot to talk about and pick.
Yeah,
now in Paris, though, it seems that Emmanuel Macron is still sounding a bit hesitant and maybe wants more conditions. What do you think is behind what he is doing? What does he want to get out of that?
Well, I think he wants a bit more certainty than we currently have, and I think we'll all applaud that because we want more certainty. What troubles me about all this conversation is we're now focusing on the date, not the deal. And let's be very clear, there is a deal on the table, agreed between the European Union and the United Kingdom. If it's ratified, it gives us all a path to the future. And we would need, I think this is the crucial issue, we would need at least tomorrow to get an understanding from the British Prime Minister that she can get support for her deal and we can get on with it. That even if it takes a little bit of extra time, we can allow for that. But it seems to me if there is to be a longer extension, it suggests that the politics in the United Kingdom is in a quagmire of sorts, that they're not able to actually agree on a path forward and that this lengthy period is required. And in that time, it has implications for us in the Parliament here. We want to make sure that we can do our work. And I think that the Council are also making sure that the UK would be, if you like, fruitfully cooperative rather than a hesitant member. And I think that's a fine line, and I think there will be a lot of focus on that.
It's interesting when you say a date rather than the deal. And Joe, you were going to say something. You said you had an idea what's going to happen before the show, but now you're going to tell us what that idea is. What is your idea?
A good extension till the end of June doesn't make any sense because then Britain must take part in the elections in May for going out of the EU end of June. So you cannot explain any citizen in the UK,
so it doesn't
neither
make sense.
back home. Doesn't make absolutely no sense. So either there is a very short extension for a few weeks till the 22nd of May, looking whether the deal will be done, or there is this at least 1 year extension to give more time for developments in the UK that could be more than a deal. It could have all other implications, new elections, second referendum, or revoke Article 50. So let's say the ball is in the field of the UK, but we don't want to be hostage again and again of this chaos.
Yeah, and Valentina, you were talking about, you were saying milestones. You said this is going to be long and drawn out, and there will be milestones. What were you talking about?
Yeah, so because the EU is always the art of compromise, right? And there are these warring factions between short extension, long extension. What's the purpose? What guarantees can we have? Even if Theresa May gives us all the guarantees, she might not be Prime Minister. There might be a hard Brexiteer in place, and then all those guarantees are out the window. So maybe the EU will come up with something like and then we will review, and then we will review. So automatic extension, perhaps, to get to this long extension, but with some review clauses in between.
I just want to pick up your point, Joe, about the elections. You see, April the 12th is D-Day in a sense that the British Prime Minister has to declare that they will hold elections. Already the political parties in the United Kingdom are selecting candidates. I sense that they will be taking part in the European Parliament elections. So therefore, in that case, I think it therefore almost implies a longer extension. And I think what we'll then be focusing on is the election in the United Kingdom. It will become almost the fulcrum of all the political reporting around the elections, which can be good or bad.
Yeah, going into that.
The character of a second referendum. We'll see how the people feel
let's lay it out,
about,
because I just want to show the audience what we're talking about here, because Theresa May, she has laid the groundwork for Britain to participate in the May's European elections, as Mairead was saying, but the EU was planning to hold them without UK candidates. So let's take a look at what the European Parliament would have looked like without the UK. So Spain and France would have been the big winners, gaining 5 more MEPs each. Italy and the Netherlands would have added 3, Ireland 2, and these 9 countries would have had 1 more MEPs each, if you look at the map over there. So, I mean, that implication, I think, for those like Ireland with just, I think 11, how many? 9, 2, if you added 2.
11 plus 2.
So you go, it would have been 13.
But our problem is we've redrawn boundaries because we have constituencies to accommodate the extra seat. So in my area, 2 of our counties have gone to another constituency. I really don't yet understand what implications it has for our elections if the United Kingdom.
But it does feel disruptive, though, because what there were plans already in place before this announcement that the British will take.
We have done the legislation that in case Britain is no more member in the end of June, we reduce the numbers to 705.
Yes.
In case Britain is still member, it stays with 751. So, of course, some are in limbo. They don't know, am I elected, am I not elected? Do I have by-elections, or what's the mechanism? It's complete absurd and chaotic. So it's really
it is
a
chaotic
drama.
and disruptive. Yeah,
it is. But I suppose if you look at the bigger picture here, I mean, I think we need, in my view, we can get over the legal and the technical if the politics of Brexit becomes calmer, and if there's a focus in the United Kingdom on the realities of even the threat of walking away with no deal. And I think that the British Prime Minister is not pushing that. I think she understands the danger to the UK and Europe from that scenario. Therefore, a deal is what's required. And Europe has said, and the UK knows, that the withdrawal agreement will not be reopened. So in a sense, it's like Groundhog Day every day.
We hear this in the corridors. Maybe we don't talk about it enough on air. But what about now? We're looking at extension, and nobody wants to crash, it seems, as you suggest. But what about a no Brexit and the possibility now? Because we hear that, but is that even likely?
Revoking Article 50. But, I mean, that's the whole democratic question is then very, very poignant, because there was a referendum and it was for Brexit, and then revoking Article 50 means, well, you just say, I'm not sure we should do that, and that's
well, neither is kicking the can down the road, right? And
But there is a political crisis and a constitutional crisis. If there is an impasse in the parliament and in the government, the last instance would be the citizens to speak out again.
Yeah,
so if you have a deadlock, it doesn't move forward, not backwards. Who should decide then? I mean, it's the people.
Yeah, because they are talking, I know in the Labour Party, their membership wanted a confirmatory referendum. So if they agree a deal with the Prime Minister and they can support it, they will attach conditions, and perhaps that's one of them. But that is, again, within the gift of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, will there be new conditions?
Politics.
When you talk about conditions, will there be new conditions, or will we just regurgitate what has already been said?
Well, I mean, there's so many scenarios now. I mean, if the withdrawal agreement is ratified in a clean and effective way and we can move on, I think we're very clear then what the signposts are. And therefore we can talk about a strong future partnership, and that's what the Parliament is hoping to achieve. Although there are colleagues from the UK who say, no, we want to remain in Europe and we would like this to play out very differently. And of course, the real issue is that Brexiteers and Remainers in the House of Commons are rejecting the withdrawal agreement for different reasons.
Exactly. There's no consensus, really. All right, well, let's look at now the Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, because he's been talking about what he would like to happen if the UK does remain inside the EU. Let's take a look.
If we are forced to remain in, we should be the most difficult member possible, because I don't think the EU and its jargon has behaved towards us with sincere cooperation. And when the multi-annual financial framework comes forward, if we're still in, this is our 1 in 7-year opportunity to veto the budget and to be really very difficult. We'd also be able to stop Mr. Macron's plans for further deep integration, because those would almost certainly require treaty change. So as they began to progress, if we were still a member, we would be able to stop them.
Well, he says first, forced to remain in the EU. And, he was talking about what he would like to see. Do you think British MEPs' powers should be limited if they were to say, if it's temporary? I mean, if it's temporary.
But I mean, I don't think the disruptive force would be so much from the
He seems to have a plan. Jacob Rees-Mogg seems to have a plan.
I mean, that would, again, be anti-democratic. If you have an elected lawmaker, you can't just limit their powers. I mean, of course, you cannot give him then the Budgetary Affairs Committee chairmanship or some function like that. But still, you can't just say, OK, you can vote on anything.
Okay, very quick last word from you,
He's
Mary.
threatening to be the naughty schoolboy in the room, and he does that very well. On the other hand, I think his Prime Minister has a different view. And to her credit, I think she's trying to deliver a Brexit that will not damage the United Kingdom and the European Union. Whether she has the strength or ability to continue to work on this, one doesn't know, which is why there may be other issues.
Well, there you go.
The risk is not in the Parliament, the risk is in the Council, where we have unanimity. And of course, it's a high risk for the EU. These guarantees are worth nothing if the government is changing.
There you go. Everything's still up in the air. Well, we have a lot more coming up for you on the program. What does the American government have against European cheese? We'll find out next. Plus, we also have a budding friendship between two strong men and what it could mean for NATO. Don't go away. Welcome back to our politics. So what do European ski suits, binoculars and cheese have in common? Well, they're all under threat tonight of being slapped with American tariffs worth billions. The U.S. released an exhaustive list of products today targeting quintessential European exports such as wine, olive oil and cheese. You can look at that list there. But also aircraft parts and helicopters. The move is the latest escalation in a spat between Boeing and its European competitor Airbus, both of whom accuse the other of benefiting unfairly from government subsidies. All right, well, in response to that, the European Commission said that they had begun preparations to retaliate over Boeing subsidies. Let's take a listen.
The figure quoted by the United States Trade Representative is based on US internal estimates that have not been awarded by the World Trade Organization. In the parallel Boeing dispute, the determination of EU retaliation rights is also coming closer, and the European Union will request the World Trade Organization appointed arbitrator to determine the EU's retaliation rights. The Commission is starting preparations so that the EU can promptly take action based on the arbitrator's decision on retaliation rights in this case. The European Union remains open for discussions with the United States, provided these are without preconditions and aim at a fair outcome.
And joining us now to discuss this is Christoph Hansen, a Luxembourg MEP sitting with the European People's Party. And still with us, Joe Leinen from the Socialists and Democrats group and Valentina Pop of the Wall Street Journal. I'll start with you, Christoph. I mean, we listened to that retaliation. Is this a new tit for tat? Is it going on the route of an unhealthy spiral downwards?
Of course, it is very unhealthy. It's an extortion mechanism that Donald Trump and its administration is imposing on us. And it's rather amusing that it comes directly after the grounding of the Boeing 373 MAX. Of course, they are struggling very much, and therefore they are putting pressure on this basis. In my opinion, it would be rather reasonable to wait for the WTO ruling on this.
But slapping tariffs on you see that list we saw on the screen, a list of everything quintessentially European.
Of course, they target, let's say, farmers and countries in the EU that would react, let's say, to say, oh, we are wrong. But I agree with you. We have the WTO panel. They should judge the figures and then make a judgment on this dispute. It is not on to make arbitrary extra tariffs on products that leads to a trade war.
Yeah. But is this the kind of strategy we see from Trump, where you push it this far and then move it back this far, just to add pressure, to put pressure to get what you want?
I mean, the timing aside, this is an old dispute, and usually when a WTO ruling decides in favor of
years,
another, actually this is what happens. Then they are allowed to slap tariffs. So this is more like a Christmas tree wish list from the US saying, this is what we would do if we win in the WTO. But of course, the EU can also come up with its own counter, and it has actually its own countersuit against Boeing. But ultimately, what matters is what the WTO decides.
So when does it end, though? When does it end?
Well, let's not forget that we are talking as well about the negotiating mandate for EU-US trade deals, and there, of course, the European Union is very reluctant on agricultural products, and that's their way to make pressure.
Hit to where it hurts, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. Well, the EU is also trying to figure out its own trade relationship with a different world power, and the other side, in fact. After years of offering China free access to its markets, Brussels is getting tough with Beijing amid concerns of Chinese dominance of some EU markets. Now, European Council President Donald Tusk and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker hosted the Chinese Premier Li Keqiang for an annual EU-China summit. Brussels has been pressing Beijing for commitments to curb its industrial subsidies, which would make the playing field more even. The two parties have signed a joint statement, last-minute concessions from Chinese diplomats. All right, let's get a little bit more from Professor Steve Tsang, director of the China Institute at SOAS University, who is joining us now from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Tsang there. Is the EU right to be worried about Chinese investment, or is this just really overblown?
Well, I think the EU is right in getting a bit more concerned about how the Chinese government is approaching its industrial policy and relationship with both the EU and EU member states.
All right, but why do you say that? What is the biggest fear?
Well, the Chinese government's attempts to get Italy to officially endorse the Belt and Road Initiative against the agreed position of the EU is an important step that the Chinese have taken. It goes beyond the previous engagement with the 16+1, which are essentially the eastern and southern member states of the EU and a few others who are aspiring to become EU member states. The Chinese are asking EU countries to support authoritarianism.
You're saying it's definitely beyond trade here. It's China trying to look for, maybe we can say, the weakest link into the EU. Is that an accurate description?
Both. I mean, the Chinese are actually interested in trade and economic relationship with the EU, and they are pushing it largely to meet their own particular needs and terms. But they are also not hesitant in engaging with the more authoritarian elements of the EU member states and supporting them, which will, in a sense, make it much more difficult for the EU to get the eastern member states to behave more like the standard EU requirements.
Okay, thank you for your insight there, Professor Steve Tsang from SOAS University. I'd go to you, Joe. You're the China expert here we're looking to. Do you think that whatever the EU does when it comes to China, it's a little bit too little too late, because China is in the EU in a very deep way when it comes to trade?
Good. Recently, we had a few wake-up calls, and I think the summit shows the assertiveness of the EU to defend its interests much more straightforward than it has been in the last years and decades, maybe. So the good times are over, where we just let China do what they want. We are now more straightforward defending us by our laws on anti-dumping, on investment screening, on security issues like 5G networks. So you could see that we take caution towards a country that is a partner, but is more and more a systemic competitor.
If you talk about mutually beneficial deals when it comes to business, do you think there is incentive for China to actually say to the EU, okay, I'm going to agree to some concessions? Is there incentive for them to do that?
Definitely. I welcome very much that the European Union finally is getting bold on the principle of reciprocity, but because the European Union has always been an open continent, but it's not on offer, and that's exactly what Jean-Claude Juncker said on this. So, as Joe as well stated, we have now our foreign direct investment screening mechanisms, which is very important. My own country is still lacking this. The problem I see is that several countries are a little bit breaking out of the European unity, as Italy and my own member state as well, who are signing up on the Road and Belt Initiative, which in my opinion weakens our bargaining position towards China.
Okay, well, just very quickly, Valentina, is this protectionism that we're going to be seeing? Just very quickly.
From the Chinese?
No, from the EU in response to China.
No, I think we're far beyond the point where basically China has already played off the weaker links and acquired assets. And I think we're very much behind the curve with reacting and protecting some of the sectors. I guess it's more like damage control.
I mean, China has really taken center stage in recent months, hasn't it? All right, we have a lot more coming up on Raw Politics. Unemployment in Europe is down. That's according to the European Commission. But are Europeans really feeling the good news? We'll head to Italy to see what voters there think on the latest stop of our election road trip. They'll go away. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, Europe has had some welcome news on unemployment. More people are working. Youth unemployment has fallen and the gender gap is closing. The figures set the agenda for today's Future of Work Summit, led by Jean-Claude Juncker, designed to ready the EU's labor market for the future. Well, let's have a closer look at those figures now. Unemployment across the EU stands at 6.5%. That's just over 16 million people, with youth unemployment at 3.3 million. Now, also many people in some EU countries are still suffering. That's the flip side of the story. The highest unemployment is in Greece at 18%, followed by Spain and Italy, while the Netherlands, Germany, and the Czech Republic, with just 1.9%, have the lowest. All right, we are joined now by correspondent Elena Cavallone from Italy, who is currently traveling across the continent, asking people what they care about ahead of the European elections. Elena, good to see you there. So what do they care about? I suppose jobs would be one of the top concerns.
Exactly. Job employment is one of the crucial issues for the country and, of course, for the European elections. Unemployment rate in Italy has also raised in recent months. But we have to say that depending on who are you talking to, you have different visions. It's true that people with short-term contract increased in Italy and people with long-term contract decreased. But the real point is that youth unemployment is high, is around 32%, and this is the issue. It's not a mystery that many people that I spoke to, many people that I know, young people, often go abroad to look for a job. But also it depends on the region you are talking about. If you go to the north and the south, there is a big difference. And we know that in the south, unemployment and young unemployment is definitely one of the major issues.
And Elena, I mean, what's interesting there, I mean, yes, jobs and unemployment is a main concern, but are politicians latching onto this? And is this becoming a battleground in the upcoming European elections?
We have to say that still unemployment and job and economic growth is the issue for the country. But in recent months, especially with the European elections upcoming, it has been overshadowed by another major issue, which is migration. This has polarized and dominated the political debate and the public opinion in Italy. So it's very easy that we can see that also reading the newspaper, but also talking to people, the impression is that migration is probably on the top of the agenda. But still, second after migration is job, productivity, growth. It's just a perception, because what really in this moment is worrying the country, but also we saw also the European Commission addressing to Italy many times, is the level of productivity, the economic growth, and of course then the employment. And today the statistics about employment confirm that this is actually the real problem that the country is facing. And since the crisis has not recovered that much,
All right, and of course, a lot of these issues are definitely interrelated. Thank you for that, Elena Cavallone there. And with us in the studio to discuss this is Brando Benifei, an Italian MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group, and he also sits with the Parliament's Employment Committee. We also have Effie Kutsukosa, a European affairs journalist with Euronews, and we also have Ame Gerike, a German MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformist groups, also sitting on the Employment and Social Affairs Committee. So you are experts in the employment scene here. So when we look at the Commission numbers, let's start with that, because Italy has still one of the highest unemployment rates in the EU. But the Commission figures overall say, hey, it's good times, good figures. What do you make of that when Italy is still not really out of the woods?
I think the numbers are very diverse looking at the different countries, and this must be taken into account. I think unemployment and creating new employment will be central to the next European elections, especially in Italy, also because on migration, we have seen starting also an awareness among people that this has been used sometimes as a weapon of mass destruction, while employment is still a big issue in Italy because of too small businesses, too little research and development, and lagging behind in economic growth on many aspects, also linked to bureaucratic problems. So we have a lot of things that we have to deal with that are more linked to that, and more people are looking into that and will, I'm sure, value this discussion also for the next European election.
And very quickly, Effie, because for Greece, with the financial crisis and you have the bailout, etc., Greece is still really not out of it.
It's exactly as you said, that Greece, of course, is at the highest level of unemployment. Of course, everybody says that it's going better, the numbers are better. But I could say that the crisis changed the whole landscape of employment. Many people, thousands, I would say, almost 1 million of young people left the country, and highly skilled people to the so-called brain drain.
Right.
There are people like doing mini jobs, jobs that can do, especially in tourism, because this is the big industry of the country, only for some months and just paid very, very low salaries. And it's the same across the country. So I think that even if, many EU officials say that the figures are going better, growth is going better, so jobs are more, I think that
it's important to look at
it's time in order for the real people to really feel the difference.
Right, rather than just figures. All right, on the other side of the spectrum, obviously Germany doing quite well on the unemployment percentage levels. Do you think, though, that this is always a question when it comes to Germany and the southern countries? Is there a two-speed or multi-speed Europe where some countries do still get left behind?
I think it's a question of qualification, because regarding youth unemployment, it means that something is wrong within the education. And that's what we have in Germany too, that we have young people heading for a job who are not qualified.
But surely that is not the only source of unemployment.
The government would like to put people in the job, but it's not possible because they're not qualified enough.
Is this a German problem, though? Is this in Germany?
This is a German problem, pretty much, regarding the youth unemployment. Otherwise, we have good numbers. Good numbers means that the unemployment is invisible. Because if you put people on part-time jobs, it looks like they're unemployed. But the problem that they are employed.
Sure.
But the other question is, in former times, a family could live from one job. Nowadays, it's not possible anymore. So we have a lot of people who are employed, but they cannot live of their wage.
So you're talking about precarious employment as well.
If I can add on, on qualifications, I can only agree that we need new investment in competences, in digital competences, in new jobs, okay. But we need to look deeper when we look at other countries. I understand the situation for Germany, but for example, for Southern Europeans, the issue is the lack of investment. We lack a real push for economic growth. So we need to change also our policies at European level. We still have a limited common investment platform. We launched the Juncker plan. It was a success, but very small. We need more of this.
I'd like to put the question to you too. So does that mean that there are countries getting left behind? You have a two-speed Europe where you have the others trudging marching
Yeah,
along.
on economic and social issues, for sure. I think we do have that because, for example, the common currency, of which I'm really convinced it's very important that we keep and we defend, needs a common banking union, a social union, a fiscal union. This means also a common budget for investments. Otherwise, it's unbalanced and will only fuel imbalances inside our union.
Which will have political consequences.
Exactly, building new nationalistic movements and their strength based on social unrest and suffering.
Yeah, and I'd like to pick up on what was said by Ama because on precarious work conditions, because I think in the South, the numbers, like in Spain, the numbers are quite high for people with short-term contracts, for example, and maybe not enough protection. So is this a bigger issue that should be given more attention?
Exactly, and we have much more people that are feeling really unhappy with what they are doing because exactly they are considered to be employed, but in fact they cannot live. They cannot really live with the money they get.
But there's an argument to be made on flexibility, isn't there?
Exactly.
So on the other side, it can be flexible.
You know, people always want a full-time jobs protected by the state and everything like this. The state says that we don't have the ways and the money to do that, so they're trying to adapt somehow. So yes, I think there is a point, and this is the difference with the past. You know, you had people like having jobs forever, for their whole life, and now you have people that are changing all the time, and many times they are doing 2 or 3 jobs per day in order to survive.
Right, okay, let's get a quick comment from you on that.
I think we don't need, just going back again, we don't need any banking union and things like that. You cannot unify everything. Which I think is very important is to also always have leading states.
Well, there are the northern and the southern perspective on this.
Which pull the others. What happened to Greece is not the right direction. To push a whole state into the debt, that's very bad business, which the banks did in this case.
But the point, just to put your point again, is that if there is investment in Italy, Italy would rise up together, and surely there's something good with everybody rising up. Everybody gets to benefit
but it has
from
to be true investment.
Meaning?
Meaning that you cannot invest money into a country and it doesn't reach the country, because they have to pay their debts. Then nothing really arrives in the
But
States.
the worry of the Germans in banking union, is it the bailing out of in case countries get into trouble? Is that?
Yes, but the problem is that without real rules on this, we happen to pay a lot more money for Greece than the amount we would have paid with a real system. When there were the elections in North Rhine-Westphalia at the beginning of the crisis, Merkel chose at the time not to support Greece in the beginning of the crisis. This made the German taxpayer pay 10 times more to lend money after that, and also the Italian taxpayer. But why we didn't do that at the time? Because we were, on one end, we had short-term electoral interest, and also we had a lot of banks from some of the European countries that lent too easily to Greece. So we had a banking union problem, and we had a last resort saving system. So we need a more unified eurozone.
Okay, you want to take a quick comment because we're running out of time.
No future for the euro otherwise.
Will never end. But I just want to say that at the beginning of the crisis in Greece, there were no structure in Europe to protect any country in debt, and of course also. And my last word is that at the beginning there was a banking problem. Banks were lending to Greece and not the taxpayers. It was quite different.
I mean, we've had this discussion existed in 2012, and clearly it's still ongoing without an answer yet. All right, but let's move on. We have Turkey. Well, let's go to Turkey because it has made its latest move in its ongoing standoff with the United States. Let's have a look at that. Stepping into Moscow. Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan is stepping up his charm offensive with Russia's Vladimir Putin. A regular visitor, President Erdogan has made his 3rd visit to Russia this year. The pair discussed their next moves in the Syrian war, but the real power play here came when they discussed weapons sales. Turkey, a NATO partner, is planning to splash out on this piece of kit, the Russian S-400 anti-aircraft missile system. News of that prompted this warning from U.S. Vice President Mike Pence last week.
Turkey must choose. Does it want to remain a critical partner of the most successful military alliance in the history of the world? Or does it want to risk the security of that partnership?
But defiance yesterday from Turkey's leader, who's pressing ahead with the deal.
egemenlik hakkımızdır. Bu bizim tasarrufumuzdur. Bundan kimse bizden vazgeçmemizi isteyemez.
Quite the birthday present for NATO, which this month is celebrating its 70th year. In this standoff between Ankara and Washington, who will blink first? The political chess game. You were both shaking your heads. Who wants to comment on what we just saw there?
Well, I think it's interesting because it seems that Erdogan is giving us some messages that he wants to see how we'll behave with him now in political difficulty and see if he can be supported some way and maybe stay with the Western bloc.
So is this a threat? Do you think this is a threat?
I think it is a threat because he takes what he needs. In the NATO, he forces the NATO to move in his favor. And on the other hand, he's not able to clean up his country because they're killing the people if they don't have the right identity. And this is something, if he doesn't clean up his own country, then he will not be able to take part in decent politics.
That's a pretty blatant power play, though. I think we can all agree on that. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, how do you feel about the new unemployment figures from the Commission? Are there enough job opportunities for young people? Well, your call is coming up at 7 p.m. CET. The contact information is on your screen. Join us later. The number is 00800 333 7002 and get in on the debate using the hashtag #RawPolitics. Our lines are opening soon, just after the break.
You know what to do? Pick up the phone.
Politics, you should listen to the public.
Democracy is working just fine.
We actually lost faith 50 years ago in politicians.
The politicians have all disagreed amongst themselves, probably because far too many of them are lawyers.
There's a lot of politicians, but we don't have leaders, especially in Europe.
There are no solutions, there are no ideas. Everything is going worse. I'm very disappointed about politics.
So those were the highlights from your call last night. We know you have a lot to say, so do get in touch with us. And let's take a look at what we are going to be talking about on tonight's Your Call. Unemployment is down in Europe. 12.5 million jobs have been created since 2014, according to new Commission figures. With a closing gender gap and rising household income, things seem to look pretty good. Not so fast. 16 million Europeans may not be feeling the Commission's good news. They are still unemployed. 3.3 million of them young people. So we're asking you, are there enough job opportunities for young people? Sandwiched between rival superpowers, China and the US, Europe is struggling to find its feet on trade. After years of offering China free access to its markets, Brussels is trying to get tough with Beijing and its growing influence in Europe. Meanwhile, the US is threatening to slap tariffs on everything from European helicopters to cheese and paintbrushes. Faced with policies like America First and Made in China, does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy?
If we are forced to remain in, we should be the most difficult member possible.
With Friday's departure deadline looking unlikely and a longer extension almost inevitable, Theresa May has set the wheels in motion for Britain to participate in Europe's parliamentary elections, to the dismay of many Brexiteers. But if elected, should they have the same rights and responsibilities as the rest of the MEPs? We're asking you, should British MEPs have full power? Have your say, Europe. Are there enough job opportunities for young people? Does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? And should British MEPs have full power? All right, so you know how to get in touch. All the contact information on your screen. Call us 00800 333 7002. Email us at rawpoll@euronews.com or look for us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. And you can also find us on Skype. All right, let's talk more about these topics. Still with us is Brando Benifei, an Italian MEP with Socialists and Democrats Group, Effie Kutsakostas, our correspondent from Euronews, and Valentina Pop of the Wall Street Journal. Okay, I'm interested in what you think, Brando, about British MEPs. We saw Jacob Rees-Mogg there. Should they have full power if they are going to participate in the European elections?
I'm still a bit confused about what is going to happen with the British MEPs, in the sense that it's true that if the extension is not so long, it's weird that they will be choosing the next president of the European Commission, the next College of Commissioners. They will be deciding the decisive part of the legislature. So I think legally we cannot avoid that, but it's a bit strange. So
if it's strange, do you think those powers,
I think that in the end the political groups will organize themselves so that it makes sense that they are limited to some functions, and nothing against my colleagues, but it doesn't make sense that they will leave in a short time and they are given the possibility to determine the most important things.
I understand it feels unfair for the rest of, you're an Italian, but what about for the British MPs? Is that fair if they say they have limited powers if they become MEPs?
Well, but on the other hand, up until a week ago, they didn't even know they were in the running. So, there have been instances like this in the past as well, when countries joined, and then there were these MEPs who were sort of in waiting. MEPs in waiting. They were already in the parliament, but they didn't really have full powers.
And also there's a lot of confusion of those
committee chairs and all that. So I doubt that they will be given any significant power, even though they will, of course, still have the right to vote. That you cannot take that away from any
of course, we want to know what you think on this. Do join us in this conversation. And Effie, you'll be co-hosting with me tonight. So what about what you wanted to jump into that conversation about MEP powers?
That I would say it's quite hard also for the EU officials and the people that are really dealing with all this stuff to see how they can limit MEPs' powers, because legally speaking, there is in the treaty like the full membership, nothing like half membership. So I guess this is the tricky point that the leaders should find a way to go through in this crucial summit tomorrow for Brexit.
Would it be causing annoyance? There are countries like France who stood to gain like 5 seats, saying, well, we were going to get 5 seats, and now
those
we're not
MEPs
going
will
to
be
get
waiting
5 seats.
forever.
Exactly, as you were saying, the waiting games. Does that feel a bit annoying then?
Yeah, in Italy we will lose 3 seats that were almost attributed already, but...
Is that significant for Italian?
Well, it's not enormously significant, but I think that the public opinion in Italy will be irritated to know that after all these, we have again the British MEPs, and it's unclear what they're doing. They're a bit in, a bit out. I know that many Italians will say, the usual Brits, that they are a bit in, a bit out of the EU, and they play
So the Italians out there, call us and let us know what you think. If you do agree with what Brando is saying, are you irritated with what is going on? Well, what's happening? All right, you know how to get in touch with us. Again, our phone number is 00800 333 7002. There it is on your screen. Email at rawpoll@euronews.com. And the hashtag is rawpolitics. And also look for us on Skype. Okay, before we go, we have time for our raw moment. We have yet to find out whether Theresa May made any progress with Angela Merkel today in Berlin, but at least it went better for her than her last trip to the German capital. We'll take a look at this. Valentina's got full interpretation of everything that just happened on screen. So what was that? What was happening? So you're saying that maybe how well she exited is probably how well she...
I thought it was a brilliant Brexit metaphor that she wanted to get out, but the door wouldn't open. And now that the door opens, well, they're not really getting out.
They're not really getting out. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah. I think that's really a good metaphor.
It is. Okay, well, there you go. All right, we would love to hear what you think on all the topics that we talked about and also the questions that we're asking you on your call. So do stay with us after this show. You call us on 00800 3333 7002. Look for us on social media. We're waiting for your comments. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. So again, that's after this show. Thank you very much for joining us this evening and do have a good night.